My wife asked if she could dance with another man at the party, and I replied, "Dance with him and stay single, because I don't want you anymore." I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to say that. I said those words without realizing it, and I was surprised by how cold I sounded. I had a feeling in my heart. It was in a room. It was a room full of smiling faces and vibrant music, and those words cut through the air like a sharp blade. There was a time I remember when I used to trust the woman next to me completely, and it felt like we were in a kind of union. It was an unshakable trust. But then, as night fell, the mask was pulled off, and I saw the truth of a betrayal that had been buried deep in the past, but which still cast a long shadow over the present. She approached. I smiled, almost innocently, and asked permission to dance with another man. My blood ran cold. My blood ran cold, and a flood of memories began to rush through my mind. It was an innocent enough request, but there was more to it than met the eye. There was a secret story buried deep in a past she had never shared with me. It was as if her past, her secret story, was right there in front of me. Though she didn't say a word, I could see it in his eyes, in the tension in his face. At that moment, I felt a lot of things: jealousy, anger, betrayal. I wasn't the calm man she knew, or the loving husband I had always been. The trust that once made our relationship so strong was shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I knew there would be no turning back. My gaze met hers, searching for a truth I didn't want to believe, but I already knew was there. It was there, hidden between our smiles and the things we didn't say. Any words she hesitated, but there was nothing more to say.
This is your story channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, please join us to stay updated with more real stories happening around you.
But there was nothing more to say. The atmosphere felt like the air around us was filled with a palpable tension. For a moment, everyone was looking at us, but it felt like we were the only two people in the room. I could feel it. The dance wasn't just a dance. It was like the physical embodiment of something she had been holding back. And then I said the words that would change everything. "Dance with him and stay single, because I don't want you anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. It was so intense, it was almost deafening. She opened her mouth, ready to speak, but no words came out. She wanted to say something, but she couldn't find the words out. She didn't need to say anything. I could still hear everything else. I already knew it was enough, or maybe I knew more. I might have known more than I was supposed to. The weight of these words was crushing, but there was still something I didn't know, something hidden beneath the surface. It might have been a betrayal, a secret that she had kept it so carefully, and somehow it connected this night to her distant past. What she was hiding. And what did this mean? I'm still trying to figure out what it all means. But now, what I really want to know is how far this betrayal goes and what it hides behind that simple request to dance. She doesn't know. I'm about to find out, though. The room was beautifully decorated. Every detail designed to convey elegance and refinement. It was so sophisticated. The soft lights from the crystal chandeliers and the music playing in the background created a celebratory atmosphere. It was a night. Many had been looking forward to it. An annual event where people in the small, cozy Denver neighborhood of Cherry Creek gathered to dance, laugh, and for a brief moment, forget their everyday worries. Among the couples, Richard stood out. He had a strong and confident presence, and his blue eyes showed a confidence that many admired. And his wife, Jessica, a woman of delicate beauty and a charming smile. They were the picture of perfection, the kind of couple everyone dreams of being. Forever. Richard had built his life. Richard had worked hard and shown great perseverance. Richard was the proud owner of a small construction company, and he had faced many challenges over the years. But he always found strength in Jessica. She had this incredible ability to brighten up any space she was in. She had a way of making everyone feel welcome. Her politeness and charisma made her impossible to ignore. She was a dear friend and neighbor to many. They were the ideal couple, the perfect example of a strong and happy marriage. But as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. Over the past few months, Richard had noticed a subtle change in Jessica. She seemed a bit distant, as if she was always like that. It was as if she was thinking about something else, as if she was somewhere else in her mind. They talked, but it felt like she was going through the motions. What had once flowed naturally now seemed forced, and moments of intimacy became rare. Richard tried his best. He told himself it was just tiredness or the stress of everyday life. But there was something there. There was a palpable tension in the air, and Richard couldn't ignore it. The once peaceful atmosphere had become disturbed. His nights were no longer peaceful. He tossed and turned in bed, worried that something was wrong. Jessica. On the other hand, he was living in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. She thought she loved Richard, but there was something inside her. She felt like something inside her had changed a part of her. She thought she had left her heart behind a long time ago, but it seems it was still beating. It beat strongly again. In recent months, she had started seeing old friends again, and this had brought back memories of simpler times before marriage, before the responsibilities that adult life brought. Among these friends, there was one in particular who stirred up feelings she thought she had left behind. She thought were long gone. Michael, her first love. Michael was Richard's polar opposite in almost every way. While Richard was stable and predictable, and Michael was impulsive and adventurous. When they met by chance, sparks flew. After more than 10 years of not seeing each other, they met by chance at a local cafe, and Jessica instantly felt a spark. It was like a fire had been rekindled. He was a different person now. He wasn't the carefree young man she once knew, but there was still a sparkle in his eyes that attracted her. They talked like old times. They were like old friends, sharing laughter and memories. Soon, a beautiful friendship was born. He had no idea that she was connecting with him in a new way. Jessica was busy with her own interests, maybe feeling a bit bored with her routine. He hadn't ever imagined that would be the case. He never would have thought that the things that had happened in Jessica's past could come between them now and threaten everything they'd built together. He decided to stick around. He was so busy with his work, and he was sure that they could overcome any problem that came their way, just like they always had before. But that night, as they were getting ready for the dance, Jessica felt especially restless. She spent more time than usual in front of the mirror, adjusting her dress, touching up her lipstick, checking herself out. She was nervous. Richard, on the other hand, was kind enough to compliment her appearance, saying she looked beautiful as always. But the lack of enthusiasm in his voice didn't go unnoticed. Jessica. She sensed it deep down. She felt like something was breaking between them, something that might be impossible to repair. They arrived. They had a great time together, but it felt like there was an invisible barrier between them. Richard greeted them warmly. His friends and colleagues tried to act like everything was normal, but Jessica seemed lost in her own thoughts. She saw Michael across the room having a great time chatting with a group of people. He saw her, and for a brief moment they met. It was a silent moment, but it was full of feeling. She felt a shiver run down her spine, a mixture of excitement and guilt that made her dizzy. The music began to play louder, and couples began to fill the dance floor. Richard noticed. Jessica felt a bit uneasy, but she decided to let it go. He chose to look past it. He didn't want to, but he couldn't help himself. He didn't want to cause a scene, especially on a night like this. This one. All he wanted was to enjoy the moment. He just wanted a quiet night, maybe to have some fun and ease the tension he felt. But Jessica had other ideas. As Michael moved around the room, a dangerous idea began to take shape in his mind. She knew it. She shouldn't, because it would be a disastrous mistake. But the desire in the nostalgia was just too strong to resist. She finally turned to Richard and asked in a soft voice, "Can I dance with him?" Surprised, Richard looked at her, not immediately understanding whom she was asking. Almost automatically, she didn't need to answer. Richard followed her gaze to Michael, who was standing on the other side of the room, discreetly watching them. Richard felt a surge of anger and betrayal, as if it were almost too much to bear. At him. This was the night he was most afraid of, the night when all his suspicions would be confirmed. He could have screamed. He could have made a scene, but instead he responded with a calm composure. It was a bit cruel, perhaps, but he felt he had to stay calm. Dance with him and stay single because I don't want you anymore. And then came the answer. It was a bit of a shock. This was a hard pill for Jessica to swallow. She hadn't expected it. She was momentarily frozen, unsure of how to respond. It felt like time stood still, and the world around her came to a halt. All the sounds around her disappeared, leaving only the gentle echo of Richard's voice, words, and so on. With a simple invitation to dance, their lives began to unfold in ways neither could have predicted. This night was just beginning, but the events that would follow would change their lives forever. After Richards left, she felt a bit overwhelmed, as if she was losing her footing. She had never experienced the coldness in her husband's voice before. She had never felt that way before. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger in exaggerated gestures, but the icy and definitive tone with which he spoke those words pierced her like a knife. The elegant ballroom, with its twinkling lights and soft music, felt like a nightmare. Her choices began to feel unbearably heavy. She stood, still, thinking about what had just happened, while Richard walked toward the bar as if he had just completed a simple transaction. Jessica didn't know what to do. She felt a strong desire to do something. She felt a strong desire to ask Michael to dance, driven by a mix of nostalgic sentiments and the thrilling excitement of reliving the past. She saw Richard from a distance, his rigid silhouette at the bar, and felt the guilt gnawing at her insides. She wanted to feel something new. She wanted to feel something else, something new. But now, it felt like everything had fallen apart. She felt torn apart. She knew it. She couldn't take back her words, and the weight of her decision was starting to feel overwhelming. It was as if she was suffocating. Michael, standing nearby, sensed the tension in the air. Between them, he paused, unsure how to respond. For a moment he paused, but then he walked toward Jessica, his face. He looked serious. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. He asked. "I'm really worried." He wasn't sure what was going on, but he was concerned. He felt like something was off, even though he wasn't sure what. He caught wind of something going on between her and Richard, but he wasn't sure what it was. Jessica. She put on a brave face, trying to hide the inner turmoil she felt. "I'm doing well," he said, looking away. But they both knew that was a far cry. They both knew that wasn't the truth. The music played on, and the couples danced, unaware of the drama unfolding around them. Jessica. I couldn't focus on anything around her. It was as if every decision I'd made in the last few months was leading up to this very moment. This very moment. She wanted this. She really wanted to relive the past, but doing so would have meant losing what she had in the present. Michael, noticing her unease, gently suggested they step outside. "It'll do you good to get some fresh air." She agreed. She needed to get away from the overwhelming feeling of being trapped. Situation. Outside the cool Colorado breeze felt so good. It brought her some much-needed relief. They were silent. They sat in silence for a few minutes. They gazed up at the vast, starry sky. Michael finally spoke. Michael finally broke the silence. The silence hung in the air like a warm blanket. "You look a little upset. In there. What happened?" he asked, his voice low and gentle. He spoke gently. "Jessica." She sighed, knowing she couldn't hide anything from him anymore. "Richard confided in me. I told you something that changed everything," she replied, still trying to process the impact of her husband's words. "I don't know what," she replied, her voice reflecting a mixture of uncertainty and concern. "To do, Michael. I'm caught up in something I've made. Myself." Michael was no. "I'm a bit of a fool, aren't I?" He knew there was more to the story, but he respected Jessica's space. But something was stirring inside him, too. Since they'd reconnected, he'd been thinking about whether things could be different, if they might have another chance. But seeing her there, in that moment of vulnerability, he realized how complicated and dangerous it would be to follow that path. But he couldn't help but feel this stirring in his heart, this hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. It was tempting, and it made him wonder. Jessica felt it too. His gaze on her, and for the first time, she wondered if she had really taken control of her life, or if she was simply being carried away by her emotions. Meanwhile, in the lounge, Richard felt more sober than ever, despite the glasses of whiskey he had consumed. His mind was swirling around Jessica's words and the man she had mentioned, the one who might be the beginning of the end of his marriage. He was confused. Michael, but it didn't matter. The fact that Jessica had asked to dance with another man, and that she had chosen this moment to reveal her desire, was enough to destroy any trace of trust he had left in her. Richard looked around, his heart heavy with emotion. He saw the people laughing and having a good time, but he felt disconnected from it all. He felt a sense of detachment, as if he were watching himself from afar. He wanted to leave, to run away, but something held him there. It might have been the curiosity of what Jessica would do next, or maybe it was his pride, unwilling to leave as a loser. Back outside, Jessica was about to respond to Michael when she noticed movement. In the room, she saw several guests. Some of them looked a bit worried as they started to leave. She and Michael exchanged glances, sensing something was about to happen. Suddenly the door to the hall opened forcefully, and Richard appeared. His face was tense, and his eyes were fixed on Jessica. He stopped in front of them, and for a moment it felt like time stood still. Freeze. Michael took a step back, curious to see what would happen next. Richard looked directly into Jessica's eyes, completely ignoring Michael's presence. "I hope it's you," he said, his voice warm and hopeful. "I'm so glad," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. His tone was light, teasing, and pain. Jessica was at a loss for words. She felt like she didn't know anything. She said now would make a difference. She had made her decision, and now she was ready to take the path ahead, even though it was filled with uncertainty. But what she didn't know, what no one there knew, though, was that the night was far from over. Something hidden was about to come to light, something that would change everyone's lives. It was going to be a life-changing event, one that would leave an everlasting mark on everyone's lives. With one last look, Richard turned and walked away, leaving Jessica and Michael alone in the darkness. Jessica felt a growing fear, as if the air was being sucked out of her. Felt like it was slowly draining from her lungs. She wanted to run after Richard, to scream, to apologize, but her legs wouldn't move. Michael, understanding the seriousness of the moment, tried to offer comfort, but he too was grappling with his own challenges. Control. All that was left was to wait and see what would happen next. And then there it was. In that tense silence, Jessica noticed something that haunted her deeply. Michael's gaze, which had been full of affection and nostalgia, now carried a shadow of something darker, something she had never noticed before. It was the harbinger of a revelation she was not ready for the face. The night still held secrets, and none of them would be easy to. She had a lot to think about. The silence hung in the air, weighing on her like a heavy stone. As night fell over the Cherry Creek neighborhood, Jessica lay still and quiet in the dark. The cold of the Colorado air felt like it was freezing not just her body but also her soul. Richard's words, they lingered in his mind, like a final and unchangeable decision. They had been companions for years, sharing joys and sorrows. Now it felt like they were strangers, and Michael, standing next to her, seemed like a distorted reflection of the past, bringing back memories that should have stayed buried. "Jessica, I really need to talk with you," Michael said. His voice was filled with an urgency she couldn't ignore. He was closer now, his gaze intense, as if about to reveal something that could no longer be contained. "Jessica," he said, his voice warm and gentle. She paused, feeling the ground beneath her feet shift and waver. "I knew this." The moment was urgent, but she was also nervous about what was going to happen next. She followed him to a corner of the room, where the lights were soft and dim. Michael turned. His face showed a mixture of concern and determination. "There's something. You must know," he began. And Jessica felt it. Her heart started pounding. "It's not me," he said, his voice soft. It's the same as before. I'm not that person. That young man you met years ago, that dreamy boy who believed in happy endings. Happy endings. Michael, I'm so curious to know what you're trying to tell me. Are you trying to tell me something? Jessica asked, her voice warm and comforting. She was shaking. She was confused, and fear began to mix, forming a lump in his throat. I never stopped thinking about you, he admitted, and what should have sounded romantic sounded more like a deep confession. All these years, I've been wondering what it would be like if our lives had taken a different path. When I met you, I saw an opportunity to right a past wrong and perhaps salvage what we had left behind. But things have changed. Things have changed. I've changed too. Jessica took a step back, and the weight of his words fell over her like a blanket of fear. Michael, we're so different now. We're all grown-ups now. That was a long time ago. We can't just go back. I understand. He continued, his voice warm and understanding. He said it in a dark tone. But I'm talking about the two of us. There's more to it than that. I have something to tell you, and I hope you'll hear me out. Jessica. I felt her stomach turn around.